Excellent.
The sound of a seagull. In the old days, they would have said, that is what we're talking about, and fucked off. Now you don't get away with that shit.
You try it.
It's just that. It's just this. Whatever's happening. Is everybody all questioned out?
I can ask a question.
Yeah.
Just maybe something practical or useful to focus on or meditate on to help maybe, I don't know, dissolve the illusion of separateness. Or the reason I say that was I was watching a YouTube video of another non-duality teacher, and as I was watching it, they kept on talking about just becoming aware of boundaries of the body, but also boundaries of the mind. And as I was just focusing my attention on that, it was kind of falling away, and it was really helping me. So I don't know, would you have maybe a similar kind of helpful tip?
No, I do not. Yeah, it's funny because, I mean, obviously nothing can bring this about, but it's, yeah, there are all these techniques, and sometimes somebody does something like that and whoa, you know, they just open up, or maybe in a gazing exercise or something, someone opens up, you get a lot of that as well. And there's something quite powerful about the gaze anyway, since it shuts off the thinking mind, so, you know, so these things happen, but it's, you know, it's acausal, and you can't, you know, for the one it happens to, there are hundreds to whom it does not happen that way. But yeah, these strange things do happen. For someone, a technique will seem to work, you know, but yeah, so no, there's nothing to prescribe. Yeah, I wouldn't even say relax or not relax, or yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks for nothing, yeah. Yeah, but if that works for you, I mean, yeah, I mean, you're going to explore that, aren't you? So, probably. And yeah, and meditation is good anyway, you know, generally. And it starts to imitate, I mean, it's just your internal state starts to become more clearer anyway, but, you know, it's not the same as waking up, but it's certainly more peaceful. So, yeah, it's a good thing to do before, and sometimes it's a good thing to do afterwards. I mean, it can get you much more in touch with your emotions as well, because a lot of people wake up, it doesn't mean to say they're in touch with all their feeling. Maybe some of their feelings they don't like anger. So that's a lot for the doormats amongst us, or the people pleasers. That's usually one that's really good to get in touch with, you know, because if you don't have that, you don't know when someone's trespassed your boundaries, and you often, you know, get in trouble that way. If you're not in touch with sadness, you don't know, you know, if you've been left out of things, or, you know, you can not realise you've been badly treated in some other ways. It's all information, so the more we have of that, you know, the healthier we are, the more authentic we can become. So, yeah. But for some people, if there's a lot of trauma there, it can be quite painful because it can bring up a lot of feeling. And feeling dissolves the emotions, but on its own, it's not always enough. Sometimes to verbally ventilate, to talk to somebody, to express while you're talking is a really strong way of like also discharging emotions, another way of metabolizing it. So, you know, so that's a good practice just for getting strong, getting healthy, growing, and, sort of getting the two parts of the brain, the left and right, to kind of work together. And yeah, if you're not in touch with your emotions, you won't know what you want as well. You can be really indecisive, you know, so because we feel our way forward really, so it can be good. You can remain very stuck without that. But your emotions may be very changed after this, so it's not the same for everyone. Meditation can raise your kundalini if you want to. For some people it does as well. But if it's awake, that's got nothing to do with non-duality anyway.
It's quite difficult to do because it's something I struggle with as well. Sometimes dissociation from certain feelings, and I think it's quite difficult, and it can take courage to express something to someone if it's, you know, whatever it is.
You don't always have to, it depends what it is, expressed directly, sometimes just indirectly to, you know, or with a friend. I mean, I don't know, it depends what you're talking about there though as well, because, you know, express it, even just being aware of a feeling, if not necessarily expressing it, or, you know, rather than acting it out, or dumping your anger on somebody, which is abusive, you know. So it's,
just to ask Dawn, would you say that you find generally that the same message is at the heart of all, most of the main spiritual practices or religions, if you like, that there is a connection there, that they're all kind of talking about the same thing somehow, in different languages, throughout different time periods? It certainly seems a way to me. I mean, I don't know what you feel about that.
Yeah, it's definitely at the heart. Just the dogma tends to fall away afterwards, and of course this doesn't negate anything of like a god could appear, like, and you know, there could be an appearance of that, like an NDE or something, like, you know, it doesn't, we don't really know what this is. As in, yeah, so it's, I think a lot of that stuff has probably come from a lot of Kundalini stuff as well, some of the religious stuff too, like the Jesus story as well, maybe like the voice of God or something like that has been experienced in the Jesus character, or which is probably a myth, but yeah, it's interesting. I sort of see that story is quite, I've always been quite taken by that story. Of course it's a story, but maybe because it seems like an absolute lack of repression in that story somehow, like
Lack of what?
repression,
Uh-huh.
like there's no buying, I just like the idea of there's no buying into the discourse of the other. So what was said was kind of free of absolute manipulation in a way, like that character, you know, the way we get, it's like seeing reality without any blinkers. When we're repressed, we don't, we're constantly manipulated by what's around us, we're seeing through a distorted lens. When that falls away, your intuition can become really strong, and you know where the other's coming from. You start to, you know, really see.
You can see better.
Yeah, you see much more clearly. It's not your yeah. It's like your right side of your brain is really switched on, so you're seeing beyond the words of what somebody is saying, and it's like, so.
That could be interpreted as reading others' minds.
Well, yeah, and I had during my awakening, I had, well, prior to that, I had that experience of seeming to be able to read
people's intentions, as it were.
Well, to know everything about everybody at all times simultaneously, like there seems to be no limit to that kind of experience, which is quite common in a near-death experience, which seems real. When talking about it, it's like, yeah, like, but yeah, so but again, it's got nothing to do with the non-dual seeing, but that stuff, yeah, appears, doesn't it? It's quite powerful, quite disturbing if you're seeing what seems to be people turned inside out, and you're really seeing what's going. That's actually quite freaky, but a lot of people have that around awakening as well. Like the illuminations, seeing as knowing, and yeah, or a symbol appears or a voice appears prior to awakening, explaining it. Yeah, it's interesting. So it's kind of in the psyche as well, that kind of, almost like the knowledge of that, the collective unconscious, so to speak. It's like people sometimes get it in dreams prior to awakening, you know, this sort of seeing that prior to it, or dreams that there's just seeing. It's almost like awakened dreams in a way, just nobody having a dream, just dreaming, which is very nice. Stuff like lucid dreams, I don't know if any of you get those.
Yeah, it's all well documented stuff in different cultures and traditions, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It just adds to the mystery, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, and it's interesting the power of manifesting in a It's just a different thing in lucid dream because you can just imagine, you know, you're in a bad situation, you're being attacked by a demon, you're like, oh, I'd like to be in a ship right now, so you're in a ship. Or I always tend to think, oh, I'd like something spiritual to happen right now, and sometimes I get like a big light display or something, like, oh, cool, this is much better. But sometimes nothing happens, it's just, yeah, interesting. Oh no! My accent.
No, you know, Dawn, I was just trying to read your lips. I'm a foreigner, I'm sorry. I see, even if I see your lips, sometimes I don't fall.
Oh, do you not? Okay.
No, never mind, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's difficult for
But
me as well. I
sometimes
don't understand much. Yeah. No.
when I have a piece of chocolate, it goes better.
Yeah. Okay. Everything is better.
No, it doesn't matter. I don't experience you as your words only. But words are also important. Part of it. Yeah.
Do you think that a lot of these practices that have been so-called taught in all various traditions and whatnot were actually really, in a way, descriptions, perhaps, of someone that's had, you know, some sort of awakening, and they see things a certain way, and then they describe, but then people use that as a prescription.
Yeah,
That seems to make sense. Doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Because it's, yeah, some people, and they universalize that, yeah, it turns into prescription, and of course it doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
Yeah, like the way they say that yoga, stanzas, you know, asanas, they came from Kundalini experiences, which seems to make sense because it moves you in certain ways. Then that becomes
A practice.
it becomes a practice, a very effective one for like health and everything else. But even in Kundalini yoga, I mean, Gopi Krishna, who was the first one who's talked about Kundalini. So he was really surprised when he went out there to all these Kundalini yoga classes, and nobody was getting it, and the teachers didn't get it. And he was like, nobody can help me, you know, because he was getting really extreme stuff. So yeah, but the minute people universalize anything to do with this, it's like, it feels like a straitjacket to me as well. I don't like those, you know, like there should be no boredom and there should be no sadness. It's like, you know, the minute you say something doesn't happen, I experience it, because I was saying, you know, fantasy seems to disappear, and then you find yourself fantasizing about something. It's like, oh, bollocks, you know, that's wrong with it. So it's, yeah, I don't like that sort of, something in me just rejects that one size fits all, you know, and also you can get trapped in that as well when you listen to someone's description and you think, well, maybe I didn't really have it like that, and then later you kind of see it in your own words, oh, that's what they were talking about or whatever, but, because it's natural, obviously, after awakening, you start listening to all these guys, and you know, and you get hung up on, well, this one said that, and maybe it's not, you know, doubt stuff, and then, yeah, right, yeah, you've got to get rid of them all, trash them all, and freedom from all, but it's always contingent. I mean, freedom from all authority in that sense, but we're never isolates either. Like, we're always affected by what's around us, and people can, you know, I don't know. I think because some people get You know, if you're with somebody who's always triggering you as well, it can obscure things for you. You know, if you're around somebody who's toxic and they're looking for your wound and you don't realise it and they're just, you know, jabbing you all the time, or, you know, so you're in pain, that can happen. Or if you're around a spiritual teacher or a speaker who says, you know, who do you think you are? You're not awake, or, you know, or something like that. I mean, some people are damning, and the mind can really buy into that, and then there's awakeness, there's no one there, and yet there's this doubt because, you know, and you can get trapped in that as well. Like, there's so many permutations of this. Yeah. So a lot of people don't want you to get it, like, you know, because they lose their power over you too, and that's the thing. So.
Can they stop it? Like,
What?
if somebody's gonna awaken, and did you stop him from awakening?
Well, in a real true sense, nobody can stop that at all. But they might create the doubt that stops you from kind of integrating that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or maybe, you know, particularly if you're a doormat and you're always looking to the other for reassurance or your reality, you know, it could have an impact that way. You know, you can be in bliss, you could be no mind for like years and yet still be stuck because someone has that power over you and you haven't quite, maybe you haven't talked about it, maybe you haven't really expressed it. That's why it's really good to express it, whether write it down or have a friend to talk to or whatever, so you can really start to own it. Because, you know, not, like I say, not everybody wants you to get, most people do. I mean, most people are quite nice, or maybe you're looking for permission, like, because there's, you know, in healthy relationships, sometimes there's a sort of like thing of like the Michelangelo effect, where you see in your partner their potential and you try to encourage that, you know, and you sort of wonder, why doesn't that come back? You know, maybe there's something wrong with me, or, you know, yeah, or I think it's particularly, yeah, people who have given away their power in general, I think, struggle with this more in owning it, and they'll stay put. But it doesn't take much to, in my experience, with someone stuck, it seems it doesn't take much to get them out of that. Almost like they're waiting for, they just need to be seen. But yeah. So, yeah, because I was stuck for quite a while. It was so obvious to me, there was no mind at all. It was just an emptiness and bliss and sitting around and like, oh, but yeah, at some point you gotta own it, so to speak, you know. Not that there's anyone to own this, but you kind of just gotta go, well, you know, take your power back. But some people are addicted to staying small as well. And of course this isn't about small and big, but it there is an energetic effect there as well. You know. Especially being part of a group or something. And it seems so common, it really does. You know, the people stuck on that doubt, it's weird. And it shouldn't matter, but there's a lot of freedom when that goes, there really is.
So doubt is a thought.
Yeah, it's a thought, but what could it?
Is it a feeling or thought? Or?
Yeah, the doubting thought. It can hold you back. It can hold you back in terms of your power relations. It can keep you stuck. But I mean, it doesn't in terms of awakening. The awakeness is there, but yet you're still beholden. You're still projecting onto the others some aspect of they are better than me. And when that doubt goes, it's a total levelling out. You know, that just goes. So there's a freedom to move. There'll be movement then, there'll be more, your life will start to flow. It'll start to move in alignment with this message. Whereas before, it might be stuck in an old pattern. So, and that could go on for years. That's what I'm seeing. Definitely. Especially with people, because for a lot of, you know, people pleaser, doormat type, there's a tendency to, when there's something happens in relationship or friendship or something, and you know, you did this, you did it, there's a tendency to accept blame, you know, oh, I'm sorry, you know, sorry, you know, that kind of thing. Whereas, you know, that extends into this, then, you know, extends into everything. So, if that's your modus operandi, giving away your power, you're probably more inclined to doubt, I would have thought. I might be wrong, that's my experience. And of the people I've talked to who are stuck, or have been stuck, after all this is seen, and I've seen it with people in a very deep state as well. Because there does seem to be different depths of this, as, in a sense. I mean, it's, okay, it's seen, you know, whatever, but, you know, when the mind is not there at all, there's certainly more peace. I think it is sweeter, you know. So some people have more of that or less of that, or see the aliveness more, or, you know, I don't know. Maybe. In the end, you're not feeling quite alone in a way when you do start thinking for yourself as well, because it's like, you know, can't look to the other anymore. It's a freedom, but it's a loss too. In a sense, it's not a loss or a freedom, but
there's a lot of ideas in spiritual circles and many traditions that you've got to get rid of the ego, and there's all sorts of ideas about what that is. And also in that there shouldn't be any specialness about anybody or anything as well, so that's a pattern that goes on. Like it should not have that sort of idea that there's anything particular going on. And I just wondered how you felt about that.
Well, the ego continues.
You know.
There's a sense of who you are that exists totally. Dawn is there with her identity. It's not owned by anybody.
Yeah.
There is that. It can be in complete abeyance as well. It can be completely absent. When the mind is there, there's no thought, there's nothing. But yeah, of course that continues. And feeling special about, you know, experiences that arise. There's nothing wrong with feeling special. It is quite special in a way.
Because it can undermine that, can it? When something's going on, like an experience that's like liked or whatever that's going on, you can say, I ought not to be thinking this is anything special, and things like that.
It's funny though.
It might block it,
When it is experienced, I suppose it seems so I suppose it sounds more special in a sense when you haven't had something. So before I'd experienced, inner light, I thought, wow, that sounds really magical. And then it's just inner light. In a sense, it isn't special, but it's kind of cool, cool to experience that.
Yeah.
So all those, because they all sound so magical, and yet they're so. Every time something like that happens, it's like, it is ordinary, but it's cool. It's very cool, but it's, yeah.
What's that expression? It's extraordinary.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's exciting as well. All that stuff is exciting. Well, some of those, like, I find visions exciting. It's like, yeah. Maybe not at the time if it's a disturbing one, particularly, but, because it's just like, what, because before I experienced it, I just thought, it's all nonsense, there's just this really, but it just seems like it's multi-dimensional, that anything can appear in this, like there could be angels, and all these realities could coexist, and why not? And because they're as real as this, and I find that really exciting, as well. That death isn't necessarily a thing. You might say, well, what dies? Well, this flesh suit, which isn't here anyway, but So yeah, the idea of death seems to have gone for me really. Yeah, because the mind's not dependent on it. Tim Freak talks about that psyche, soul, synonymous, isn't it? It's the same thing, isn't it? Words coming out your mouth. It's immaterial, isn't it? So kind of magic. But not everybody's interested in that stuff. There's not a lot to say about non-dual, I suppose. Not really. It's just this, but you could just say that. It's just this. It's this. And it's hard to remember how it was prior. I think a lot of people, I don't know, I can remember instances of it, maybe more visceral, like the kind of anxiety that I seem to be experiencing all the time, for quite a long time anyway, It's amazing we can survive that amount, we psychologically, a lot of people go through so much. And it's easy to project as well when you're in bliss, you sort of thinking everybody else is in peace, like it's that sort of also, I remember just thinking everybody's, it's like, just peace really. But sometimes wakefulness seems to be visible. I've had that experience where you can kind of see it in somebody and it is there, and that's, I don't know if you've had that experience. Have you ever?
I think we talked about that earlier, wasn't we? We talked about seeing, recognising something in somebody, the same wakefulness, the same light. We were talking about it earlier.
recognizing.
The same light in somebody else. You explained it like the beam of the moon.
Ah,
The same
yes.
light in others. You recognise it.
Yeah, like how the sun covered by the shade of a moon, dark, but at the edge is these protuberance, how they're called,
Light beams,
lights
sunbeams.
of, yeah.
Right.
And I see people like those things, though it's not seen, but underneath they're all
The same, have the same light.
manifestation of the same sun.
Oh, right, okay. That, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that it's not visible, but it's some kind of seeing or something which which gives. It doesn't matter who they are, what they're talking about, or what they're doing, or they're talking rubbish, or small talk, or whatever, or very wise things, or philosophy. It's all kind of more or less on the surface, but underneath this light, which is there, and they are kind of manifestation of the same, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, in a way. And that people somehow feel it, because I've changed in a way. They feel that something is there. Not that I love them or like them, but something is there. They feel it. I know they feel it. We can talk and I know they feel it. That I might discuss with them something or say, oh, you're talking rubbish or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's still not acceptance. I don't know which word to use. I accept them as they are or something, but it's, words they don't say anything. It's just, but that's kind of, yeah, maybe the result of what I've seen, but that everything is love, and then there is nobody. And the me, everything is like dots, and they kind of melt it down into this background. Everything, everybody. But they melted down into this, and then they came up again, manifested it out of the same. That sort of gave me, probably that's the thing I was not understanding.
Okay.
That I'm kind of not thrown out, but I came out with this. Maybe that's. Oh, thank you Paul. Sometimes you don't understand just what is going on. You can't put a name on it or.
I'd say that you can kind of see the light in everybody the same.
Yeah.
Only that their mind is on top, acting out, doing whatever it's doing. But when the mind becomes quiet in anybody, you can see very clearly the same light.
Substance.
You can see exactly the same beingness, which is without problem.
Yeah.
The purity of being, you can see it there exactly the same, I would say.
Yeah, with some people it just flags up so much, and you kind of know. I think, and I've certainly not had that verified, but I also find that interesting phenomenon of someone who's maybe like psychopathic, or they have an emptiness as well, but it's a different quality, like in the eyes. It is different, but they can look quite similar, but they're not the same. But because there's nobody there, but in a different sense,
Yeah.
which is interesting. Or there could be nobody there and psychopathic, or narcissistic, whatever. But
Yeah.
it's quite interesting. But yeah, you're right. You can see in anybody. You can see when the mind is the forefront. You can see that. I think everybody can kind of see that, or more or less.
I think that's why we all chase experience, don't we? We will do things that, whether it's art, creative things, or whether it's sport, or whatever it might be, where it takes your full attention, so the mind isn't active, and therefore you feel at one doing what you're doing, you feel there's no problems, there's no self actually, it's non-dual at that point, isn't it? So
Yeah.
in that flow state, as it were, that's why everyone seeks it. And yet it's only temporary, because they're in and out.
Yeah. No wonder, you know, being an artist, like the art is never any good unless the self isn't there.
That's
It's
right, yeah. It's not even art, we can't call it art, it's mechanical, isn't it, really?
yeah, it's just painting is going on. Yeah. Probably keeps you quite healthy and sane, I suppose, that if you're doing stuff like that. Absorption is happiness, isn't that one of the sayings? It's just, and then there's just absorption without that. And absorption states can vary in intensity as well. I think that people almost expect, you know, an experience around somebody, like they've really projected onto someone. It almost opens the way for at least some sort of experiences to happen. It's almost like the brain responds to that, you know, I'm around this person. It's strange as well. Just being in a meeting and, you know, like when people sort of kick off and start having spontaneous craze, you know, spontaneous movements. Like, there is something energetic in the room, it seems, you know, like, that's quite a strange phenomenon too. Maybe it's just a permission, I don't know, but because there's no agenda really in these meetings, I think there's something in that too that kind of goes with the non-dual anyway. There's just being here, you don't have to ask a question. It's very welcome. And it certainly deepens when there's no agenda anyway. Like, I don't know if you find that, but when you're just sitting, stuff falls away. You know.
Something you said which I just found interesting at the beginning in your introduction. You said that sometimes people can perhaps awaken and then, you know, if they're still, they could not necessarily be very righteous or whatever you want to call it, but they could perhaps, you know, use that for different purposes perhaps. And I found that interesting. I don't know if maybe that's what you've discovered, and that'd be interesting to find out. But my feeling was that if when the self drops away, because there's no intention left, there's just what's happening, it's all unfolding by itself, as it were. Of course the mind still has, like you say, it still wants to perhaps, if it was interested in doing certain things, preferences and hobbies, or maybe they carry on, maybe they don't, depending on whether or not they were driven by the ego. But if the self drops away and there's no intention, then how is there intention to use awakening for a purpose, as it were? Do you see what I mean?
Well,
So it could be conditioning, of course, I understand that, but in part of the character maybe, but certainly not really intention, because if there was intention there would be a person there, right, that intends.
well, okay, just put it like, well, so, I don't know, if you're a malignant narcissist or a psychopathic narcissist, you can't survive without adulation. You can't survive. I mean, it's really painful not to have attention. Even bad attention is something. So it's a natural thing. So and you're
conditioning, perhaps.
well, it's the character. The character is characterological, so it doesn't shift. So obvious, to get supply to get that, because the impetus is power over. It's not love. So love, getting close to something because there's no love felt. So it's got to be power over and power over. So you maybe start a cult or whatever. Just have people around you and then you've got your guaranteed supply. You've got, you feel at ease because you're being, what's natural to you then is to have people look up to you, because you can't, because the terror underneath it, there's a lot of shame in narcissists or, not psychopaths so much, but so it'd just be a natural, movement. I mean, it happens all the time, doesn't it? People get found out in cults, and
Of course, yeah.
and then some of them apologise, and everybody's like, "Oh, they've apologised, don't come back in," and they do it again, of course. They do it again, and it's just, yeah. But then a lot of people believe that, that all falls away, but it can't, it's pretty much immovable. I mean, that's what they find in all the clinical psychologists and stuff. It's not. It doesn't shift.
So the ego stays.
Well, the ego's just identity, what you like and what you want, and your qualities. It's kind of, that just goes on. It's just, you're not that,
By the awake person, you can still live by the ego.
It's not living by the ego. There's just, there's a Dawn character here, right? It's that's the ego. It's just, that's not who I am. There's no I am. There's no ownership of anything. There's no location for being or anything. There's no, but it's, just, what I enjoy reading certain books, and what I love, what I don't like, and all those things. I mean, that doesn't change,
I mean, usually people can wake up, but they can have power hungry or something. So are they not fully awake, or is it?
Well, no, I mean,
they
it's just,
still have ego that's power hungry.
well, in a sense, like the narcissist or the psychopathic narcissist, they don't have an ego anyway, because they have no sense of self. They get that from the other, so they tend to. So they'll get someone, instead of dating, they really take hostages, but so they will absorb that person's personality. So they don't really have one for themselves, they're just empty inside. So they take on the characteristics of those around them. But their only way of moving, because the way they respond to hurt when they're really young is, no one's ever going to do that to me again. So they power over, I'm never going to let someone hurt me like I was hurt when I was, because they get wounded very, very, very young. And usually by being given too much freedom and at the same time being really badly treated. So neglect plus being treated as special, that really fucks someone up. So but I mean, that's the minority of people. Like most people are kind of normal. That's 1 in 4, 1 in 5. I think it's one of the statistics. One of Dr. Brahmani, like clinical psychologist. It's actually quite high, isn't it?
What's that, sorry?
Just the prevalence of narcissists or psychopaths in the population.
1 in 4.
She reckons 1 in 4, 1 in 5. It was supposed to be 5%. That was the original diagnosis, or statistics, but she reckons it's that much more.
How
So
many people?
Because when you were saying the number that came to mind is probably maybe like 1 in 20 or something, and you mentioned the original figure was 5%, so that's just what I would estimate it to be.
uh,
I mean, 1 in 4 seems a bit too much.
Yeah.
Seems a bit
But
much.
we can use that.
Well, we're living in an epidemic of that now, aren't we? So the society encourages it, and but I mean, factor one psychopaths, they make really good spiritual teachers because they've got no emotional problems whatsoever. They're really chilled out. They've got no fear. So you see one of them and they'll be really powerful, really strong, and like they come across really well. So
When you say factor 1, what does that mean?
oh, there are two types of psychopaths. Factor one is the ones that they're really kind of together, so they got really no psychological difficulties. Factor two would be like a sociopath. They're much more chaotic. They can't hold a relationship or a job, or they'll do like small petty crimes. If they do crimes, it'll just be like on a whim, so they won't be able to strategically do something. They'll be like, fuck it, I'll just nick this, or like they always get caught, and they're very flaky, kind of much more chaotic, a lot more emotional turmoil and stuff. And psychopaths don't care about power, to be honest, but they'll use what they can, really. They're not that bothered. More sex and money. They just want the whatever. Talking about my favourite subject. Most people are nice. Most people are really nice. Amongst non-duality speakers, luckily. And we all have bits, and we've all got shitness as well. Like, everybody's got bits and stuff they need to work on, really.
I don't know if I heard this correctly when you were talking. I don't know if it was referring to yourself or someone else before awakening or after. You mentioned about some phenomena that can happen. If I heard correctly, did you say you saw people inside out? Did I hear that?
Well,
correctly?
I just mean, I don't know, but it seemed that I could see what they were doing, what they were up to, like inside their minds, basically. Yeah, it seemed like that. It was an experience before awakening, so yeah, it's just to know everything about everybody. Sort of, it was one of those experiences which I've heard quite a lot of people say in MDEs they experience that. Near-death experience is quite common. But not now, so don't worry. I don't have that at all.
I remember I asked you before, can you tell what people are thinking?
No.
You said thank.
Not at all. Who wants to go around like that? Jesus. Oh, mystery. It's much better. No. Don't want anyone reading mine either. Thanks very much. I don't believe anybody could. That's a reassuring thought. I'll keep that one. But I've heard I did hear one spiritual teacher use that, like you know, I remember thinking, yeah, you're right. But I don't know.
Would you think that there tends to be a lot of confusion caused in the spiritual seeking domain, what you want to call it, by seekers? Because each tradition discusses things in its own terminology and very often disregards the terminology of other traditions. So for instance, particularly like non-duality, you know, they have their own kind of terms, as it were, and they say, you know, there is just this, but there is no awareness, consciousness, no experience. And it can become, I feel, this is just what I feel, that perhaps it's confusing a little bit because of the terminology. Because mostly, of course, terminology is dualistic, isn't it? It's normally, it's built in the world of subject-object, and so, for instance, to say something like, you know, oh, well, there's just awareness. Well, you know, that's dualistic because it means there's someone that's aware of something else. Of course, subject. So obviously, when terms like that are used, I feel that what's not being related to seekers, perhaps, is that it's meant in a non-dualistic way. So, in other words, awareness is meant to be non-dual awareness. In other words, there's not someone aware of something else. There's only this. And this can also be replaced with the term awareness, non-dual awareness, or it can be replaced with the term beingness, or with the term perceiving, or with the term what is, or with the term you know, thusness or thisness.
Can be dropped just this word.
It's just a word, so it's just a word. But I think what happens is it tends to be that, you know, in particular traditions, they use other people's terminology. They use it in different ways, and they kind of use it in a dualistic sense, rather than realising that it's meant in a non-dualistic sense. Because of course, there's no one that's aware, separate from aware, you know, from what's happening. Of course, or conscious, or you know, separate from beingness or anything else. So I think that's what I feel. I don't know if you feel that might be the same. That seekers are very often confused by the way that certain terms are used, you know, in certain traditions. Because even like to say this implies in a way a that.
Yeah.
There can be saying other.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So even that's not perfect. So whether you say awareness, of course not awareness of, but awareness as is what it means, or consciousness as, or beingness as, rather than of.
So awareness doesn't necessarily demand this of. It can be used
as,
without. I don't know about the language. It's just
exactly. So you can use awareness as this, which is arising for no one. So this is, you could call it a dream, you could call it awareness, you could call it anything you want, really. But because we use dualistic terms, people tend to say, well, that can't be right because it's subject-object, but they don't understand. So I think that causes confusion for people.
Yeah, it can, but it seems like the trend has moved away from that. Everybody's dropped talking about awareness now. Like it seems to be, you know, kind of fallen away from a lot of speakers, isn't it? It's like there is only awareness. Everybody was saying that. Nobody's saying it anymore. But yeah,
Well, Muji calls it pure awareness.
pure awareness.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
okay.
what
Right, okay.
Subject awareness, not the object.
Yeah, you can see how it's confusing. Yeah.
I think it's a shame, really, because it makes the mind just keeps turning, it can't make sense of it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. But yeah.
So, I mean, would you perhaps, if you was to be asked, to say that this is synonymous with perceiving that's happening, not by anyone, but just the fact that something's arising, or beingness, or isness, or thusness, or thatness, or the appearance of consciousness, not to anybody, but as consciousness. So you can give it any name really,
Yeah.
as this. It's just a label that points to something which can't be named, of course. Right?
Yeah.
Would you say the same thing?
Well, there's an experience happening or appearing to happen. I don't use any of those terms really.
No.
Yeah. It's just, you know, alright. Yeah, but I think awareness is easy to reify, you know.
Subject object.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bit.
Being the observer, which is a bad practice, as it were. Yeah.
Yeah, but sometimes you just got to say something. I don't know. But you don't have to really. Just this, but yeah.
But there is also a word, a watcher, so it's kind of intermediate between observing, or
Observing.
aware of, or the watcher disappears as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So you can.
It's
It could be used as a skillful means. Being the pure observer, just observing what is,
Yeah,
and then that
observing.
can, and then the self doing that can drop
Even
away.
observer disappears.
Yeah, that's possible. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's again, what you have to, if you want to find something that everybody agrees with, you have to discuss it, and that will take ages, and that's, I don't think there is any point in it. But maybe between us here, we can find some word which, yeah, but
Nothing can actually encapsulate.
in general, it's such a vast world of spiritual things and groups and movements and God knows what. Oh,
So yeah, there's just nothing happening and
nothing.
disappearing. Disappearing to happen. And yet nothing, and that's known, and that's so obvious in a way as well. So
Isn't that called the spander or something? Is it appearing, things appear, disappear. Is it the spander in Sanskrit?
is it? I don't know. You tell me. I don't know.
Yeah.
Set yourself
Yeah.
thinking of all these things in Indian and
I just know as a seeker, I was very confused. Yeah.
Yes. Strange. Someone appears to be here, and yet there's no location for that. It's odd.